Sorry about that. I just received that we weren't actually live streaming yet. So when we are live streaming, I'll have to repeat myself a little bit there.
Hi, Mayor Jordan. It's going now.
Welcome to an open house for 19 Elm and 13 Mountain Street.
Recording in progress.
Public are advised that our meetings are live streamed by the Town of Grimsby. Individuals and media may be audibly and or visually recorded during this meeting. As a reminder, all electronic devices are to be in silent mode during this meeting. Only people who have registered as a delegation have been provided the Zoom link. If you have not registered but would like to provide comments, you can do so by emailing planning@grimsby.ca. If a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the Town of Grimsby in respect to the proposed zoning amendment and official plan amendment before the approval authority gives or refuses to give approval to the zoning official plan amendments, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision of the Town of Grimsby to the Ontario Land Tribunal. 2, if a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the Town of Grimsby in respect to the zoning official plan amendment before the approval authority gives or refuses to give approval to the applications, the person or public body may not be added as a party to the hearing of an appeal before the Ontario Land Tribunal. In the opinion of the tribunal, there are reasonable grounds to do so. All right, planning and development open house for Monday, September 13th. Given the notice, we'll start with the delegations. All right, we're going to start with Sandra Yam from 20 Mountain Street. Welcome, Sandra.
Sorry to interrupt, Mayor. I believe we will be doing the presentations first, starting with Terry. And then,
yeah, I wasn't given a formal agenda, so go ahead, Walter.
Thank you.
Sorry about that. Technical difficulties there. Thank you. And welcome to the official plan amendment application, zoning amendment application open house for 19 Elm and 13 Mountain Streets. First, we're going to be going through this planning department presentation, which will just give an overview. Then we'll be going through the applicant presentation, and then there will be questions and comments. The purpose of tonight's meeting is to provide an overview of the planning process and how you can get involved, provide an overview of the policy and regulatory framework and the rules and regulations that are in place. And the applicant will provide information and details regarding the proposal. And then they will be able to answer your questions and listen to your feedback. Why can plans or bylaws change? The Planning Act provides authority for applicants to submit applications for development proposals that do not meet the current official plan or zoning bylaw. The town is required to process these applications. Official plan and zoning bylaws may only be amended if it is determined that the proposed changes comply with the overall intent of the official plan and result in development that is compatible with the surrounding neighborhoods. You can see the planning process here. So first it starts with the pre-consultation. So then the applicant submits their proposal. Then there's the public and technical review. And we are at this current period right now for the public open house. Following that, there's the statutory public meeting, There's analysis and revisions, a staff recommendation report, and finally a council decision. You can always have your say in these things. Please tell the town what you think. Please write a letter and email to the planning department at planning@grimsby.ca and send a copy of your letter or email to your ward councillor. You can stay informed with the process by doing so and by providing your mailing address to the planning department. By doing so, you will receive the notice of future meetings, information on how to obtain a staff report, information regarding speaking in front of committee, should you wish to, and information on how you can appeal the application at the appropriate time. So here's the proposed development that we're going to be talking about tonight. You can see it. It's on the corner of Mountain and Elm Streets. The top building you can see in the reddish tinge is Wolverton House. The lower one is Wolverton Hall. And then in between those is a plaza. And then behind those buildings is the proposed residential building. So this is what it looks like from the front of Mountain Street. And here you can see the proposed development these are from the architectural package. You can see the Mountain Street elevation, and then on the lower one, you can see the Elm Street elevation. Now the official plan allows the property is within the downtown intensification designation, which permits a mixture of uses and is proposed for intensification. The max height is 4 stories, but however, council may consider up to 6 stories. The amendment proposed is to permit a max height of 7 stories. You can see the subject property right there. The zoning bylaw amendment, the current zoning downtown intensification with a special exception on 19L. The exception allows for additional uses, lessened parking, and loading spaces. The zoning also permits a wide range of uses with a maximum height of 4 stories and 40% of lot coverage. The proposed zoning in the amendment is downtown intensification with a special exception for the entirety of the property. That would permit additional uses such as a community hub with a definition included, as well as dwelling units at the 1st story. The proposed modified performance standards for height, parking, including non-exclusive use of visitor and non-resident spaces, front lot line, lot coverage, setback requirements, as well as relief from provisions relating to stepbacks per additional stories, front entrances, and building placement in relation to the front and rear lot lines, as well as a continuation of the existing exception. And now we will turn it over to the applicant. So Elsa, you could present your proposal.
Thank you, Terry. Drew from Deanna's presentation deck. My name is Elsa Fancello, and I'm the VP of Planning and Development with Casa Point Numa. On behalf of Casa Point Numa, we are very excited to share and discuss our development proposal at 13 Mountain Street and 19 Elm Street with you today. Since we acquired the properties in 2018, we have been making initial investments on the site, as well as building community partnerships, such as the creation of the GBF Wellness Hub and the Grimsby Music Fest. We want the site to be a community meeting place and for the development to support diverse uses and cultural programming opportunities. Through the adaptive reuse of the Wolverton House and Wolverton Hall, the creation of a large town square in the middle of the preserved heritage buildings, and the creation of a residential rental building that has been carefully designed to respond to the neighborhood context, we believe that the proposal will meet and hopefully exceed a number of the objectives for this area. We have also been hearing from you early on in our process through our project website and through our community facilitator, Marilyn McRae. This feedback has been extremely valuable to our project team, and we look forward to continuing the discussion as well as we advance the project. I'm now going to pass it over to my colleague, Jasmine Frolick, who will provide the land acknowledgement and initial project overview. Jasmine?
Hi, everyone. So glad to be here with you tonight. So my name is Jasmine, and I'm an urban planner working at Castle Point alongside Elsa. So Drew, if you could go to the next slide, I'm going to read the land acknowledgement, which we feel is a very important part of the truth and reconciliation process. Drew? Drew, are you having technical difficulties?
I'm laughing out loud, actually, but yes. Can you see the land acknowledgement now?
No.
No. I can take over screen sharing if you like. No.
It's just pausing my screen share. So just a moment, I'm going to unshare and then share again.
That was good.
Okay, can you see now?
Yes, now I see the presentation overview. So if you want to go back one slide, I believe.
Okay, sorry.
No problem. I think we're all used to these technical difficulties in Zoom now, unfortunately.
So for those of you, just to entertain everyone a little bit further, it's usually Jasmine that runs the presentation and I tell her to go next, but in this case, she let me take control. So I apologize before we even begin. So are we ready?
We're ready.
Okay, go ahead.
So this is our land acknowledgement. So we would like to acknowledge that we are on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Ojibwe, Chippewa, and the Haudenosaunee peoples. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties and is within the land protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Today, this gathering place is home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, and this acknowledgement reminds us that our great standard of living is directly related to the resources and friendship of Indigenous peoples. This acknowledgement is an initial step to begin the process of truth and reconciliation. As you probably know, in 2015, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission issued 94 calls to actions in order to redress the legacy of residential schools and to advance the process of Canadian reconciliation. So through the course of this redevelopment, we will be looking for opportunities to support Indigenous communities. And for our presentation tonight, we're going to provide a brief introduction to our core project team members who are online with us and are available to answer your questions, provide an overview of where we are in the process. Then Drew is going to provide an overview of the development proposal that we submitted as part of our official plan amendment and rezoning application. And then we will open the floor for Q&A from the people who are deputing tonight. So our vision for this project is to bring residential, retail, and community spaces together into a vibrant mixed-use site at the corner of Mountain and Elm. And as part of that vision, we're proposing to retain and incorporate 2 existing heritage buildings on site and also to create a significant amount of green space. So for those of you who don't know, Castle Point Numa is a values-based company with over 30 years of experience. We work across the GTHA and in select US markets with a focus on heritage and mixed-use projects. And we're very excited because this is our first project in the town of Grimsby. So tonight, as mentioned, we have our architect, Drew Sinclair, who is a principal at SVN Architects, who's going to present our development proposal. His colleagues, Aaron Budd and Luke Carries, Luke is our landscape architect, are also here to answer your questions. And then we have a number of additional team members on the line, which include Allison Shooter, who's our planner at Bousfields, Philip Evans and Emily Collins, who are heritage consultants at ERA Architects, Laura Gardner, our civil engineer at RJ Burnside, Brad Smith, a landscape architect who oversaw the visual impact assessment from Seraphin Design, and last but not least, Stephanie Hardis, our transportation consultant at BA Group. Next slide, please. So as mentioned by Elsa, our first priority upon acquiring the properties was to make some significant upgrades to the Wolverton House and the Wolverton Hall in order to protect them and to ensure their continued prominence on site. So in February of this year, we launched our project website, which we continue to update regularly. You can check it out at www.thewolverton.ca, and we will have that address up at the end of this presentation. So in late 2020, we initiated our preliminary concept design and launched a number of on-site activations with community partners, which included, for example, the GBF Christmas Hamper Program. And then in the spring of this year, we shared our project objectives with community members and got their feedback in advance of preparing our official plan amendment and rezoning application. And finally, our first application was submitted on May 31st of this year. So where we are in the process, as Terry kind of already touched on, there are many steps in this iterative process. So there is plenty of opportunities for your participation and input into the process. Our team is going to continue to reach out to the community at regular intervals through email. If you're not already on our stakeholders community list, you can send us an email at grimsby@castlepointnuma.com and we'll add you. Or you could send an email to Terry and she can forward it to us. And then on our project website, we continue to update that regularly. And if possible, we do hope to add in-person events once it's safe to do so. So if we can go next slide, some of the feedback that we've heard from you. This past spring, we surveyed the community on our project objectives, and we asked you to rank the 8 objectives that we proposed and ask for your feedback if we missed any to add them. So of the 8, very interestingly, everyone chose the same top 2. 2/3 of folks chose ensuring high quality architecture and design excellence, and 1/3 chose ensuring the adaptive reuse of historic buildings. And then community members also suggested some additional project objectives, including ensuring that the community is engaged throughout the process and considering the amenity needs of users in different life stages, including young families and seniors. And this feedback really helped us to prioritize our project objectives, and we're continuing to return to them to measure our success at each step through the process. So since we haven't been able to host our typical in-person meetings, which is something that we like to do from the jump regularly, we're happy that community members have been engaging with us online. So we've had close to 900 unique visitors to our website, 1,200 visits overall, but 900 unique folks, over 100 views of our presentation of the proposed concept design, which is on our website, and it's also on our YouTube, which we posted in February 2021. And then many emails to our project email address at grimsby@castlepointnuma.ca. So kind of some key things that we've heard. I'm not going to go through them all, but in general, we've heard that folks appreciate the regular updates on the project website, and that members of our team, including our community liaison, Marilyn McCree, are available to respond to feedback and questions. Community members have also expressed their general support for the project and are looking forward to getting to the site plan approval phase of the project, where we get to determine building materials, colors, and window treatments. And we're very excited to get to that stage as well. So now Drew Sinclair, our lead architect, will walk us through the development proposal. Over to you,
Thanks,
Drew.
Jasmine. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Drew Sinclair. Well, first of all, thank you very much, Mayor Jordan and councillors. And I'm very pleased to be here tonight with all of you, delegates and neighbors, and our project team. As I began, my name is Drew Sinclair. I'm the project architect for this project, but I'm part of a much larger team, as Jasmine introduced to you, that includes landscape architects from our own office, but also a rich suite of planners and engineers and other landscape architects who've all been contributing and inputting on what you're going to see here today. Now I have to make the slideshow work again. As Jasmine mentioned, one of the very unique things that Castle Point is bringing to this site and to this context is a real desire to, I guess, generate a response to the site from the community and from the context. And this isn't unique to this project for us. We're working with them in a handful of contexts where this is a standard that they apply everywhere. And where it comes from is partly through meeting with you. It's partly through spending time on the site and understanding the community at the first point of entry. And what we do at the front end of these projects, and we do it with you, is try to establish a set of principles that will govern the design of the project moving forward, the creation of a community in situ. Understanding this is already a place, it's a really unique, dynamic, and really interesting place, a beautiful place. This set of principles was developed when we began work with this team, it would be about 18 months ago, on really spending time on site and trying to understand what the potential was there, with those extraordinary heritage buildings, with a really amazing, grade across the site and the relationship with the escarpment and of course, Main Street. The priorities as we've set them out are first and foremost continuing to invest in the site and neighborhood, and you'll see that as a theme as I start showing you imagery of the project going through. Two, integrating community spaces that are accessible to the public is really, really important. So that means we have to pay as much attention to the landscape, how people get into the buildings, both the public functions. Remember, there will be retail, there will be commercial space in these buildings, but there will also be a very significant community space that will be introduced into or reintroduced or maintained and improved within Wolverton Hall. So how those spaces are both created but kept accessible through the relationship of design inside and landscape design outside. Adaptive reuse of historic buildings is important here, not simply because there are historic buildings, but because these buildings are so important in the context of downtown Whitby. They're extremely prominent buildings along Mountain Street at the intersection of Elm. I'm sure most of you are familiar with them. Some of you have probably spent time inside them. The history of both sites is really, really amazing. And the material character of both buildings has really lent itself towards the design solution for the rest of the site. A contextual approach to development is something we're all committed to. So to optimize the building to make sure it's both responsive to the cultural context, the heritage in downtown Grimsby and along Main Street and along Mountain, but also to the environment. The direction of sunlight that we sit facing with addresses facing west and with addresses facing south. You can imagine what the site's like in the summertime or throughout the seasons, making sure that the building, as we introduce new housing and new homes onto the site, that they're great places to live, both indoor environment and outdoor environment. We designed from the ground up to include great open spaces, and you'll see how we've organized the whole building to create a series of really unique, but kind of exciting animated spaces around the various uses inside and outside the building, and then of course responding to context, the escarpment, the views, the way people will come to the building, the way they'll enter it, but also how they'll pass through, around, and by the site. All of that's been critically important to us in developing a preliminary response. You're all familiar now, the site has two municipal addresses, 13 Mountain Street, which is the address of the historic Wolverton House, which sits right in the center of the view. And then the second being 19 Elm Street, which is the Wolverton Hall, a converted church that's been functioning as a community meeting space for many years. The site includes a number of ancillary buildings and obviously a large amount of hardscape surface and a number of mature trees. And all of those will be responded to as I go through the presentation today. There is a planning context, and Terry presented to you a very high level view of the way the site sits within the city's planning frameworks. Most importantly, both properties and the properties together sit within the urban settlement area. And as Terry mentioned, they are located firmly within the major intensification, or one of two major intensification areas within the town that are identified in the official plan. The specific zoning for the site, you can see on the left-hand side, there's an excerpt from the town's official plan that identifies this as part of the commercial core as an intensification area. And on the right, an excerpt from the city zoning bylaw that calls out these lands as being part of an area called downtown intensification. It's really important to remember that there are two different, we'll call it classifications of downtown zoning in this case. Downtown Main Street, and I think we have spent a lot of time understanding really the quality and really the amazing energy of the historic downtown, all of the wonderful buildings that front and lend Main Street. It's really amazing, retail and commercial environment at grade. Downtown intensification serves a slightly different purpose, both in the official plan and the zoning. It's where the intended intensification is a planning term that simply means really new development, the development of new houses and new jobs, new uses interior to the already built city or already built town. You're building them inside the town as opposed to building in suburbs and building at the perimeter. I think it's important to note, and this is something that town staff can share more detail on, is as of 2015, Grimsby's official plan policies are all seeking to guide 80% of all residential growth as intensification inside the town boundary, which means the town needs to find sites like this in intensification areas where new housing can be provided in order to meet its own growth projections. But maybe most importantly, Main Street needs people. Main Street needs residents that are walking, that are on the sidewalk. This site has an incredible opportunity to both continue to animate, in a way, reanimate parts of Main Street that are evolving constantly. The application that we're reviewing right now, and as Jasmine mentioned early on, Terry mentioned as well, is an official plan amendment and a zoning bylaw amendment application, both intending to both work fully within the spirit of what's currently anticipated within the official plan to provide new housing and mixed uses in the form of intensification. The amendments sought are to seek modifications to the built form policy, specifically the built form policy. So both documents, both the zoning bylaw and the official plan, anticipate these lands will go through a redevelopment process to provide new housing. I mentioned context is a really important part of the development principles. Here you can see us zooming out a little bit, 1 to 50,000 feet. This is a good starting place for understanding the way this site sits relative to 40 Creek, relative to Main Street, relative to the extension of Elm to the west, of course, mountain, moving between the mountain and the lake. What was important for us in beginning to understand how the site sits relative to larger context is trying to see both from 50,000 feet what it looks like, but also with regard to the natural heritage, the conditions surrounding it. It's really critical to understand how each new development, each new home, whether in the form of a multi-residential development like this or in the form of a single home built anywhere in Grimsby, how they contribute towards I'll call it a post-carbon future. We're going to speak to this a little bit later on in the presentation. I'm going to provide you an overview of some of the work that's already been done on this. But what's top of mind for us, and specifically as SVN and the project team coming together here, is trying to imagine this as not just a development within the community, but something that contributes in a really positive way to meeting the town's energy long-term environmental objectives. That it brings stormwater out of the net system. That it has an opportunity to be a positive contributor to the urban environment, both from a cultural point of view, but also from an environmental point of view. Moving to the ground, we tend to look at these sites, aside from just their physical context, as zones of cultural activity. You can see Main Street, Elm Street, Mountain Street, the intersection of the three, and the triangle, or the heart of Grimsby, that's created by those three axes. Each of those streets has its own character. As you know, Main Street is identified as unique within both the city's official policies and in its current form. The types of buildings that dot or line Main Street are unique in their context. They're similar to other main streets throughout the Niagara region, without the area. One of the unique things about Grimsby's Main Street is how well used it is, and it's how much life there is along Main Street today. And one of the most important things that we brought to the analysis going on was trying to imagine how this development and the new housing brought to this site would be a net contributor to Main Street. The circle you see, the 500-meter radius, is approximately a 5-minute walking distance. So you can see from the center of this circle, where the proposed development is at 13 Mountain and 19 Elm, the 5-minute radius brings into view the entirety of Main Street, the lower portion of the mountain, and Mountain Street moving south up to the top of the escarpment, and of course the QEW interchange, as you can see it at the north edge here, and the entirety of 40 Creek as it moves through the core. But most importantly, it also brings into perspective a number of other kind of dense developments that are within the core. This is within the larger intensification areas surrounding Main Street, but also a series of neighborhoods. And you'll see as you go through the development how the proposed built form responds to this. What I meant to mention when I was talking about the development process we're in right now, Jasmine mentioned that a large portion of the next phase is where we talk about materiality, where we talk about a lot of we'll call it the fine-tuned elements of the design, such as color palettes, windows, how exactly the heritage buildings and the buildings tie together. What we're showing you tonight, and I want to maybe overemphasize this, is still somewhat plastic. It's really important that you understand everything you're seeing as a concept only, because your input hasn't yet been received and integrated into it. Obviously, we've received a lot of public feedback through the forums that have been created to discuss the project, but the inputs of tonight's meeting will play a large role in helping us refine the proposal as we go back and begin to provide responses to staff comments and move forward towards, ideally, a site plan submission in the near future. Each of the streets surrounding the site, you can see here with a little more character on the Google Earth view, you get a better sense of what the built form is like surrounding the site. You can see Balsam Lane at the rear to the north of the project, the municipal-owned laneway. Many of you probably parked in the municipal lot at the back, the LCBO off to the right-hand side or to the east of this image. You can see historic Wolverton Hall here, number 2 and 3 identified on the plan. The 2 being we'll call it the 4 portion of the hall, or the historic nearly 100-year-old portion of the hall. 3 at the rear, the mid-century addition, which was added quite a bit later. 1 Wolverton House, which similarly has a series of later phase additions. The original house over 100 years old, with the later phase additions coming largely within the early part of the last century and the mid-century. At the rear, number 6, jumping around a little bit here, the Gatehouse, which is now the current pedestrian link between Balsam Lane and the site. And just to be clear, and we'll get into this a little bit more when we get into the site plan, there is proposed to be maintained only a pedestrian connection between the existing parking on along the Balsam Lane parking lots. We're not proposing to create a new laneway or vehicular connection between the two. And then along Elm Street, you can see at the bottom of the image, number 4 and number 5 on this sheet, the historic buildings along Elm Street. And then a series of images taken along Main Street in the upper right-hand corner to give you a sense of something I think you all know quite well, the character of Grimsby's Main Street, east to west. On the left, 13 Mountain Street or Wolverton House. On the right, 19 Elm Street, Wolverton Hall. Both date from slightly different eras of construction. They're about 20 years apart in terms of their original construction dates. And what's really amazing is the diversity that time period lends the two in terms of appearance. The brick is a little bit different, sourced from different areas. You can see if you circled around 13 Mountain Street, we don't have images of all sides of it today. Each era of construction is marked with a slightly different tint or tone of brick. You can see the same thing in 19 Elm between the historic portion of Wolverton Hall and the late addition at the rear. This is an image you've seen a couple of times. We'll be referring back to it a number of times. I'm not trying to give too much away by showing it repeatedly throughout. But what was critically important for us in trying to figure out the relationship between these two and how they would lend themselves to the creation of a new, really spectacular public space was how a building set back from the street could deliver something unique, something that doesn't currently exist in downtown Grimsby, a new public plaza, forecourt to both buildings, that both the new development, historic Wolverton House and Wolverton Hall could all play a role in animating. You can see this at the forecourt. This image also shows the slope. I mean, this is a little bit like the whole image is at an angle, but this is the real slope along Mountain Street as it moves towards, from the lake towards the mountain, just off to the right. This is an image, of course, across Mountain Street, looking towards the intersection of Elm and Mountain over on the right-hand side here, and left as you move down towards Main Street and downtown Grimsby. Assessing an appropriate way to respond to the heritage context and to really operate and work with this historic fabric has been a real challenge for us. And what we often do early on in the project is to look for inspiration or try to find approaches within the surrounding neighborhoods and communities that lend themselves to a project like ours. There's 3 examples that you may have heard me speak about, past reference to this project, or you may be familiar with yourselves. Deer Park United Church is a project that's currently under construction. It's underway in the city of Toronto. It was a United Church near the intersection of Avenue Road and St. Clair Avenue in Toronto, where the approach that was taken was to really turn the church inside out, was to take the roof off, was to use the fabric of the historic church, the original stone walls, and use those as the animating frontages for the public entrances into the building. And what was the church hall before now becomes the major public space. It's a new public space surrounded by lobbies, other types of animation, new retail, commercial, small offices, and a community space as well. The old post office in Cambridge reopened in 2019 as something called the Idea Exchange. It's a library run by the city of Cambridge. It's a library without books. It's the historic post office, one of the best examples, and I'll have to lean on Philip and Emily to get this exactly right, of we'll call it early 20th century Gothic architecture in Southern Ontario. It's a remarkable building that sat dormant for many, many years when the post office migrated to a modern facility. So in the library reoccupying the historic building, one of the challenges was to keep intact both the appearance and I'd say the austerity and significance of the historic architecture while introducing new functional elements to accommodate the modern program. So the approach that was taken was to contrast the two, to have a deeply modern series of ribbons and new a glass tower, and the highly functional elements of this, the new technology-focused program are inserted in those elements, and then the administrative and more granular library programs are all located in the historic building itself. The Niagara Falls History Museum in Niagara Falls, and it's a site that some of you are probably very familiar with, takes a similar approach. It occupies an old limestone building with the local Queenston limestone, and marries it to a new limestone clad building using modern techniques in new ways to provide that exact contrast. The old building had wood windows, the new building had wood windows. And so there's a play off modern and historic in the same material palette in order to give it its character. The contrast is what's critically important in all instances, that in order to effectively pay homage to and to respect and to protect the silhouette and the importance of the historic structures, the contemporary structures are set back and rendered in a very different type of material or materiality. And this is something we've been working with regional staff and town staff on trying to find an appropriate response to. Zooming in a little bit and giving you a sense of where Wolverton Hall sits. Obviously, you can see that the late addition to Wolverton Hall has been removed. The new addition, or the new functional elements of Wolverton Hall, a portion of the new commercial kitchen and the access will be located within the new building. And then Wolverton House to the north here, sitting flanking what I was describing previously as the public plaza. The public realm is the tissue, or what brings this building most effectively into the city. There are a series of really important spaces that are going to be created through this development. Maybe most importantly, the public plaza that I already mentioned, the forecourt, the public forecourt, the new downtown plaza that will be created between Wolverton House, which will continue to be at grade a retail space or commercial space. And we're currently anticipating for it to have some kind of food or beverage hospitality use. And then on the south side, Wolverton Hall, which will become a new community hub space. We'll talk a little bit about that later on. And you heard Elsa and Jasmine both refer to this, but it's critically important that this piece is being planned as a publicly accessible community hub space that will be replete with community kitchen and all the supporting amenities to run a diverse range of community programs. But the plaza itself, shaped by the building, lined on all sides by animating spaces, including community amenity space for the residents themselves, is the most important kind of singular element of the overall. And then along the eastern edge, where we're introducing new townhouses at grade, we're proposing what I call a residential muse, or a small laneway with landscape gardens along its edge leading towards an outdoor amenity space that'll serve the building, but will also be publicly accessible with some rear yard access down towards the Balsam Lane access to that rear portion of the site. The driveway access in and out is exactly where the current curb cut, or directly adjacent to where the current curb cut is off Mountain Street, but there will only be one vehicular entrance into the site, shown more or less where we're showing it here, off Mountain Street. And this brings you down a long ramp into the below ground parking, which is located below the building. There is no above grade parking. All the loading and servicing for this development are within the building or below the building. To give you a sense again of the character of those spaces, seating, play structures and features, a rain garden and small private gardens along the Mews, a large amount of public seating, bench seating, outdoor dining space within the central plaza itself, and a series of really well-appointed and elegant arrivals and courtyard spaces as you move past the main building entrances. The plaza, just to describe its character a little bit further, some of you, again, not looking too far afield, the renovations that were made to the old post office in Thorold a few years ago that introduced new accessibility infrastructure that allows people with every form of mobility concern or disadvantage to access the post office in an effective way, understanding that these will be public facilities and the amenity of the space will need to be accessible. We're looking at the same type of treatments at the interior. The Deer Park Church conversion, which I mentioned previously, a similar type of treatment where we're really using the materiality of the three faces of the building to create that really strong quality of space in the plaza itself. And then the Trias Winery in Niagara-on-the-Lake, the idea for how the space might be used, that there will be outdoor dining, there'll be a really amazing indoor-outdoor play between the indoor program and the outdoor programs, and that there will be seasonal programs that occupy this as well, that extend the life of the community hub and the life of the commercial space out into the plaza. The outdoor amenity, we've taken a really long interest in trying to reintroduce a series of native plantings that aren't found as much in the 40 along 40 Creek or along the bench. as they're not found nearly as frequently as they would have 100 or 150 years ago. This project in Vienna is one that we're paying close attention to. It's wood housing, Seestadt Aspern. One of the intents of the private landscape areas in this was to reintroduce a series of native plantings to help with basically ecological restoration in the broader area. We're looking at a similar type of treatment, trying to find a series of, and Luke Harris from my office can speak a little bit more about this if there's specific questions later on, a series of really native or indigenous plantings along the musing corridor to the outdoor amenity space in the rear. Carly, living in Berlin, took a really interesting approach to trying to connect the outdoor life of the building, the outdoor amenity life of the building for its residents to the indoor amenity or the indoor life by introducing a series of resident controlled planted gardens or allotment gardens. So we're trying to determine whether we can operate a program like this here where we're providing outdoor growing spaces specifically for residents on the site. And then of course, a major portion of the program will be play. We don't have, I'm speak about this in a moment, but I hadn't had a chance to say this yet. There were a number of comments that came back from people commenting the original application about condominiums in the core. And I think it's important for everyone to understand what's being proposed here isn't a condominium project per se or market housing for sale. This project is being proposed as an all rental project, badly needed rental housing in the heart of Grimsby. So when we talk about the family scale of units or the desire to have diversity interior or the kinds of residential units or housing we're talking about here, we're not talking about units for sale or condominium. And there were a lot of comments or a number of comments as well about the quality of some of the condominiums that are being built elsewhere in Grimsby. And I think what we want to emphasize tonight is that there's a long-term investment being made by the development team here to both rehabilitate the existing buildings, but also to create a new institution on this site in the form of a community hub and to deliver really high quality housing that this group will continue to own moving forward. To help you understand what that community hub space might look like or how it might function, Artscape Young Place is one of the many facilities in the GTHA operated by Artscape. Artscape is a not-for-profit organization that supports arts in our communities and provides spaces for the creation of art and the experience of art. Artscape Young Place is near downtown Toronto. It's a converted school that provides both studio spaces for artists as well as gallery and performance spaces for use by the community and the residents within the building. In a similar way, it takes its cue from the One Project co-housing in Vienna. Again, a space that provides both studio space for artists and people in the arts community, but also performance space and gallery space. Some of what might happen in that space can be hinted at by what's been happening there for the last couple of years. The partnership projects with the Grimsby Benevolent Fund to run their the Christmas hamper program, their holiday hamper program. Also, the music programming that's been going on there over the last year and year and a half. And I believe there is an intent in trying to formalize these kinds of structures to come up with an ongoing community program within the hub that will both bring regular programs into that space, but also allow other agency and groups within the community to use that space when necessary. The fundamental elements that will lend lend to its usefulness will be a renovated community kitchen. There's already a community kitchen that's widely used within that space. There will be a new community kitchen. There's the large assembly space or the historic hall that'll be maintained and improved in its form. St. Cuthbert's Community Centre and Kitchen in London is one of our inspirations for this. A large multi-purpose space. It's a completely a not-for-profit community space with a really high quality community kitchen that lends to its usefulness. The extended family community kitchen is one that's a little bit closer to home. That is a very, it's in a new commercial space, but one that has a very similar kind of usefulness where there's a large community kitchen and a very large multi-purpose space, and the two together lend to its usefulness and make it very, very useful for community organizations hosting events within the Waterloo area. The townhouse muse that I talked about, now again, I mentioned before that this is rental housing. And it's critically important that there be a diverse range of unit sizes to accommodate really people at every stage of life. One of the most dire needs in new housing in the Grimsby area is, of course, family-sized housing, attainable family-sized housing, especially in the rental section. So a full 40% of units within the building are family-sized, meaning 1+10 or 2-bedroom or larger. 10% of the units on the whole our townhouse unit, our family-sized units are 3 bedrooms or larger, including the townhouses along the Mews. So again, I think this is the only slide I have that might speak to the diversity of units. The idea here is that these are front doors that really open up onto a public space, a publicly accessible space, the Muse that connects back to the amenity and potentially back to Balsam Lane as well. And then the doors onto the street. Each of these little triangles signifies a public entry point into the site. These are private. Excuse me for these aren't all public. These are the private entry points into the townhouse. But all the pink arrows denote public entry point with the lobby access off of Elm, the major lobby access into the community hub, also off of Elm, right at the corner in front of the new public plaza, the large public plaza space with entry into the commercial space at the base of Wolverton House, a secondary entry point into potentially a second retail unit within Wolverton House, and then the lobby entrance, the second lobby entrance. There's two lobby entrances into the building, this one off of Mountain Street. And views as you circumnavigate, move around the building. You're familiar with the middle view, the Elm Street perspective, and I think we have this blown up in a moment, so I won't speak too in depth about it. And then a view looking south along Mountain Street that shows you the northern entrance that I mentioned, directly adjacent to Wolverton Hall into the housing. All in all, this speaks to the size of the building. The site, in its present form, is a little under an acre in size right now. It's about 36,000 feet. There is a proposed road widening on the Mountain Street side, so Mountain Street will be widened. The functional width of it, as it's a regional road, won't be widened concurrent with this project, but the width of the ownership, the region's ownership of the road, will need to be widened through this application. So it reduces the area of the site to just a little over 30,000 square feet in total, or 2,993 square meters. The total gross floor areas, the total building area inside the envelope within this building is just a little over 70,000 square feet in total, but that includes both the interior of the existing Wolverton House and the existing Wolverton Hall. So the existing non-residential gross floor area, again, is just right around 3,000 square feet, or 272 meters. And we're introducing new non-residential area of around 190 square meters on this site. So in total, sorry, to do that math quickly in my head, but in total just shy of 5,000, almost 6,000 square feet of non-residential use. And that's in the form of the new community hub and the new retail uses. And then as you can see above, the new residential gross floor area here, 6,431 square meters, or about 67,000 square feet of residential GFA. So what does that result in? It's about 74 units in total. You can see here the total scale of units, the majority very large. I misspoke earlier, I mentioned 40%. It's actually closer to 60% of all units are family size, 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom, or larger, with a minority of units, 26 units are one bedroom in total. There are 102 parking spaces being proposed. All of them are fully enclosed within the building. 84 total bicycle spaces, both interior to the building and exterior to the building as well. And then the views of the building, I spoke about this already. You can see the animated forecourt, the high quality plaza space between the historic buildings. A view from Elm looking north towards Wolverton Hall, the lobby entrance to the new Wolverton Hall Community Hub. You can see how the whole residential building pulls up at its corner to create a really proud and really prominent public entry point in front of the new plaza that sits right adjacent to the intersection of Mountain and Elm. The secondary lobby into the residential right by its side. So all the uses along the roadway along Elm are animating public uses, with the Muse cutting down the sword between the side of the building. The materiality of the building, as I mentioned earlier, it'll be a real subject of review and analysis during the site plan phase, but we've gone to great lengths to work with Castle Point and trying to understand what meets their objectives, which is to create a long-lasting, beautiful, durable building and durable architecture. We're working in a palette of stone and masonry right now, with deep set windows to make sure it's referential and consistent with some of the heritage buildings surrounding, and making sure, as I mentioned before, it's appropriately contrasting with the historic red brick of Wolverton House and Wolverton Hall. And then a view looking south along Mountain Street towards the escarpment. You can see the primary entrance point, or the Mountain Street entrance into the residential. On the left-hand side, Wolverton Hall that's being wrapped or surrounded in a kind of glass ribbon that extends out into the courtyard space, and then a better view of the native plantings that are being proposed for the floor of the animated courtyard that sits in the middle of the building, the major public plaza. So we have in this portion of the presentation a very high-level overview of a sample of the work that was submitted with our zoning bylaw amendment and official plan amendment application. So it's important to note at this time, as Terry mentioned at the beginning, and Jasmine repeated, that all of this material is available through the town of Grimsby. I'm providing only some high-level outcomes from the studies as they took place, just to give you a sense of the depth of analysis that's been completed to date that may inform some of the comments that come forward tonight. But if there is any interest in reviewing any of the original material, it can be made available through the town, and I think the best source to follow up on that with is Terry. Or you can always reach out to us. And I'm not sure if it's referred to back at the end of this, but before the evening is over, we'll make sure that you have, again, a link to the consultation portal that's been set up online to review all the material. As you're likely aware, one of the key components of the zoning bylaw and official plan amendment submission is a shadow analysis. We're proposing to increase the permitted height of the building from 6 to 7 stories within the official plan. Similarly, the zoning bylaw from 4 to 7 stories. What's shown in the drawings here are the difference between, in red, what would be called the as of right or permitted by as of right shadows, what would result if we were to redevelop the site as of right. And what's shown in pale blue are the resulting shadows from the current proposed built form. So it's important to note that the current shadow path for all, this is shown in the spring equinox, and it's generally the most indicative condition when it's a time of year when people are outside. It's very similar to the fall. So September 21st, as March 21st and September 21st are taken as kind of the best indicative indicators of what the impacts of the building will be on times when people are in the outdoors using the space. It demonstrates pretty clearly that the impacts, the shadow impacts, generally fall on the lands to the north, on parking lots and the churches and a number of the existing commercial uses. I'll just scroll around here. You can see 8:35, 10:10, 12:10, 4:10, and going forward 4:10 in the afternoon, 5:47 or approximately sunset, when the extent of shadows proposed by this development fall on Balsam Lane parking lots. 4:10, the extent of shadows just slightly outside of the permitted as of right shadows, again, fall on Balsam Lane in the parking lot. Earlier in the day, the shadows tend to fall almost completely within the site itself, because the building is held quite far back from the lot lines. The shadow impacts are minimal. And then, sunrise earlier in the day, the shadow impacts do cast across mountain. The as of right permissions allow those shadows to cast almost all the way to the plaza to the west. One of the really important submissions, specifically within Niagara region and Grimsby, when proposing anything really above 2 stories, is a visual impact assessment. It's required by both the region, the town, as a required submission for both official plan and zoning bylaw, but it's also necessitated by the Niagara Escarpment Commission in order to review against what are, in essence, protected views of the escarpment. The work for this was completed, as Jasmine mentioned, by our team members, SDG. Brad is here today if you have any questions about it. The submission was made with our original submission. Niagara Escarpment has already completed their review and has accepted its findings. So generally, the setting the building back, holding its form, and keeping to the 7 stories is as preserved and protected for the views that are expected to be preserved for the escarpment. The site circulation and parking, as was mentioned earlier, Stephanie Hardis from our team is here to answer any questions you might have about the analysis that's gone into the parking supply on site, but also site circulation, how the loading will work, how parking access will work, how bicycle access will work. But it's important to note that the findings of the study are generally, consistent with what would be expected with regard to parking supply for a new rental housing development of this type in a downtown area. In Niagara region. One of the principal objectives of our project is really encourage walkability, but we also want to make sure that people have full functioning residential units and access to parking. So all units have access to parking, and there's an additional allotment of commercial parking at grade to make sure all proposed uses, including Wolverton Hall and Wolverton House, continue to be supported by parking on site, 102 spaces in total. One of the other, whenever we're proposing, again, buildings above what the zoning bylaw and official plan amendment currently permit, we're asked to submit a wind study to look at what the wind impacts are of this type of form. This map is the kind of output that comes out of pedestrian level wind study. Green denotes where spaces are comfortable enough that you could sit really without feeling the impacts of any proposed we call it built form related wind conditions. Yellow is where it's comfortable to stand, where you can stand continuously without feeling discomfort. I think it's important to note that the existing built former site conditions lend to a whole series of the same kind of mixed conditions, but there are no negative wind-related conditions or what would be perceived to be dangerous or unfavorable wind conditions that are created by the new proposed built form on the site. And this is evidenced by the really where yellow and green are located on this diagram. Again, the full report is available through the town or on wolverton.ca website. Heritage is, it's been a repeated theme throughout this presentation. You know that two of the most remarkable parts of this project and the most remarkable parts of the site are Wolverton House and Wolverton Hall. So understanding, what the prominent aspects are of each of those buildings and making sure they're both protected for, preserved, or as much as possible remediated and restored through the development process has been an objective of ours since the beginning. As Jasmine mentioned, Philip and Emily from ERA Architects are here. They've been part of our design team from the very beginning, helping us understand the history of these these houses, how these buildings were composed, and the elements of them that would lend the most to really an active conservation strategy moving forward. The submission did include a full suite of technical reports that assessed the existing services to the site. That includes water, stormwater infrastructure, Grimsby's stormwater infrastructure, Grimsby's municipal sanitary infrastructure. Just without diving into this too deep, the outcomes of the study were that there is more than enough existing servicing to accommodate a development of this size on the site. And then, as I mentioned earlier, a key and primary focus of our work, both here and elsewhere, is to try to understand how any new development, new rental housing delivered into an area like this, an already built area within an amazing heritage context, how it contributes to a post-carbon future, really looking towards a long-term sustainable, Grimsby emerging as a sustainable place long-term. Our team, SVN, has been working with our engineering team and our consultants, our sub-consultant contributors, to really understand from a building orientation and materiality point of view, from where we position the building on the site, the orientation of the building, how we can assure that the units we're designing have the best access to daylight to minimize the building's energy use, to make sure that the building envelope with regard to how much glazing there is right now is optimized in terms of energy use. We're looking very, very carefully at the extent of green roof. So the roofs on this building will be planted or vegetated to a certain degree, which plays a number of important roles. Most importantly, it helps to alleviate or even remove impacts on the existing stormwater infrastructure, but it also allows us to keep water and reuse water on site in a really effective way. It also really helps with the energy performance of the building. So that's been a real focus of ours. The massing, in a way, the imagery that you're seeing and the material choices we've made have all come from the same place. We're trying to find really low embodied energy materials that can be incorporated into this building. So on the net or on the whole, it's a positive performer with regards to embodied carbon or embodied energy. We want to be, which basically means that there's been a lot of sustainable thinking already given in material selection, how the building is composed. And then, as I've mentioned a number of times, we're trying to find a way to reintroduce only native plantings into certain portions of the landscape, but making sure that all the plantings that are introduced in all parts of the site, including along mountain and elm, are both drought tolerant, but also promote biodiversity. And there's a really strong mix of plant species that lend to both landscape character, but also long-term performance of the site. So at a high level, that was a lot of content we went through very quickly. To go back and without having to go through the slide set, to give you a sense of what we talked about tonight, first and foremost, this is a project that endeavors to both adaptively reuse heritage buildings, but also celebrate them within the downtown Grimsby context, to give them a new place by creating a significant social gathering space, a green space right in the heart, right in the core of the development. As I mentioned earlier, the planning framework supports this site's contribution to meeting the town of Grimsby's intensification targets, its growth targets. It goes a long way towards keeping that 80% of growth inside the town and close to Main Street, where the residents of this new community will contribute to the animation, the activation, and the performance of retail and hospitality and all the things that we love about Main Street today. New housing with a high walkability score is critically important, but it's also important that we provide a diversity of housing for every generation and demographic. Remember, there's a real focus here on larger units, on family size units, unit sizes of 2 bedrooms or larger, and providing a mix of those residential units, but also a mix of retail and community spaces that make sure this is really part of a complete community, that there's a full balance of jobs, a full balance of, we'll call it energy contributors to making this thing balance out, and making sure that the frontages on both Mountain and Elm are contributors to the active and vibrant life of downtown Grimsby when this project is complete in a few years. So thank you so much for attending, but this meeting's not over yet. I believe now I'm turning it back over to Mayor Jordan, although I'm going to wait for Mayor Jordan to confirm that. But before I go off, I'd just like to thank all of you for listening to us tonight. And I want to remind everyone that we have set up our project project email at grimsby@castlepointnuma.com to receive any feedback you might have for us outside of the forum of this meeting. And I encourage you to visit www.thewolverton.ca to, again, on that website, there's another version of the presentation I gave tonight, and the submission materials that I mentioned can be made available through the town are also available for download on that site for your review as well. So
great. Thank you for your presentation, Drew. And now we'll move to the delegates. First up, we'll have Sandra Yem from 20 Mountain Street. Welcome, Sandra.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, councillors, and contributors. I'm Sandra Yem. My family resides at 20 Mountain Street, and I speak for them as well. As a resident living within 200 meters of the proposed high-rise at Elm and Mountain Streets, we have several concerns. Grimsby is a special community. Residents enjoy a slower pace than a city, fewer crowds, less crime, less traffic and pollution, spectacular views, modern amenities, restaurants and shops, green space with a lake and escarpment at our doorstep. This 7-story application adds a massive modern high-rise towering over an architecturally significant heritage church and dwelling built in the 1800s. It will add more than 200 people in rental units, add possibly 150 more vehicles downtown, creating more traffic congestion, pollution, and parking issues. It will shade residences and retail stores in its path. If approved, the 7-story high-rise will change the harmonious balance of our downtown core. The features that families now love about living in Grimsby will dramatically change. I always admire the magnificent view of the Niagara Escarpment as I enter Grimsby town from the north on Christie Street. The escarpment, designated as a UNESCO World Biosphere Reserve, and our view of it is simply a treasure we must protect. A massive building rising 120 feet or so in front of the escarpment will forever block and ruin the view that citizens have held dear for centuries. A 7-story dense high-rise is simply not a good fit in this location. So how high is 7 stories? It is notably 5 stories higher than any dwelling or building on Elm Street, Mountain Street, or Main Street. About 100 feet high, and a maintenance penthouse above that. Imagine, if you will, according to the Sun Shadow Report, on and about December the 21st, when we value our sun, the long shadow made by this 7-story will cover homes on the west side of the Mountain Street, plus the parking lot and front entrance to Food Basics. Also on this day at 2 p.m., the long shadow reaches Main Street, and by 3 p.m. covers Main Street and stores on the north side. Most impacted are the residential homes on Elm Street, Mountain Street, which will have various sun shadowing all year round. These dwellings will lose privacy and the enjoyment of their property, as at least 6 stories of rental units will overlook their homes. Concerning parking, I see there are 102 parking spaces in the plans for residents and retail, instead of the required 127 spaces as set out in the bylaws. The applicant bases the reduced number of parking spaces on imagined future improvements in transit, rather than parking congestion happening now and expected for downtown. The applicant details parking data for cities within the Greater Toronto Area, but no data is shown for rural towns. It is believable that resident and visitor vehicles will use the free public parking lot on Balsam Lane as well as on Elm Street. Citizens have always enjoyed free parking while shopping in downtown core. Will that change to paid parking lots in the town to regulate possibly residents' parking during the day and night? Traffic congestion is an ongoing issue, especially where Mountain Street traverses through the downtown core. Mountain Street is actually Regional Highway 12, and a highway it is. We have lived on this highway for over 20 years. We have seen vehicle and especially truck traffic with accompanying noise increase dramatically. It is a heavily used, very narrow road servicing the escarpment and the expanding community of Smithville. It is used daily by 53-foot tractor trailers, water trucks, dump trucks, tractor trailers hauling agricultural implements, livestock, and feed. We routinely see large trucks and cars driving through the yellow caution and red light at the intersection of Elm Street. We cannot engage in conversation in our own front yard. The speed is posted at 50 miles per hour. Tractor trailers will completely fill their designated lane, create quite a wind when one is using the sidewalk. There's no buffer between sidewalk and narrow road. The Elm Street and Main Street intersections now are very dangerous for pedestrians. We do not see bicycles or leisurely walkers on Mountain Street for a reason. In this location, this proposed 7-story high-rise will add to, amplify, and echo the noise of this intense vehicle traffic, as well as add a dangerous setting for pedestrians. Grimsby needs affordable housing. Does this applicant offer affordable housing, housing for low-income seniors, or our most vulnerable young adults? Smart development and growth can be achieved when both developer and citizen representatives are respectful and work together. Respect is translating to observing Grimsby's bylaws and official plan that have been carefully and thoughtfully put in place to preserve the attributes that Grimsby families love and want. Let us work with integrity to ensure Grimsby remains a desired place to live, to value and protect Grimsby's unique small town, low profile, family-friendly character, its culture, heritage, green space, and scenic views. In our estimation, this project would fit in a 4-story height only. Respectfully submitted. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra. Up next, we have Dave Rollison, 18-107 Main Street East. Welcome, Dave. All right, Dave isn't here. Up next, we have Brian McCauley, 9 Main Street West. Good evening, Brian.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have downtown business, so this development would be a neighbor of mine. And honestly, I think it's very positive to have new people living in downtown. We haven't had a new rental in many, many years. And I think it would be a very positive thing having a hub in the downtown, a cultural hub. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Up next, we have Robert Hatton, 31 Merritt Crescent. Good evening, Rob.
Mute. I'll be, thank you, Mayor, and all. I was a little bit cynical about this development initially, and all along as information came out, it started to kind of warm my, I started to warm up to it. I think what's important is the affordable housing and rental component. It's not a condo project. And I think that distinction I learned about was an important thing to take away. I like the complementary design. It's not a box. I've traveled a lot in my business, and I always compare to what other cities in different countries do. I think this works. 7 stories is tall, but on the other hand, I look at how it fits in, and you know, Ms. Yem's comments do resonate. The other thing I think it does do, and I think Brian touched on it, it kickstarts responsible planning, and it sets a design standard that other developers will have to live up to, and that's important. I like the materials, the materiality that made it. But when I look at any development that the town has to consider, I said, how does this make Grimsby better? And I think this ticks a lot of the boxes. Now, the issue of traffic is real, but that traffic issue in Mountain has been there a long time, and I would urge the region and the town to help figure that out. I don't know if we've looked at one-way roundabouts to solve a lot of things, but you know, I've traveled Europe many times that has big calming things. And I think a big ring right around Elm and Main and up Mountain one way would go a long way. That's, again, I'm not a traffic expert. I've only lived here 35 years. But like Brian has said, you know, we've lost in that. When I first came here, we had a movie theater, we had a bakery downtown, and we didn't have a burned out corner at Elm and Main either. So this is going to be a huge kickstart to that whole area, and it's going to invoke vibrancy that we really need. And I've always thought this is the kind of thing we need. But most of all, I've learned as Castle Point Numa has done this, and I've met with the developer personally, they're serious about the livability aspect, and that, to my mind, is there's a trust that I've come to grow and appreciate, that this just isn't build some boxes, let's leave town. And for those reasons, I'm very much in favor of it. I think the time is right. There's an OP and all that other stuff, so I'm comfortable with leaving the town staff to working out a solution with this developer. So I'm in favor of it. Been here 35 years. This is responsible project in my view. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Up next, we have Elizabeth Sesnick, 2 Old Orchard Avenue. Welcome, Elizabeth.
Good evening.
Wait a second.
I have to say, I didn't know some of the things about this development because I only saw what was on Let's Talk Grimsby. And I have to say that there were quite a few things that I liked about it: the rental aspect, the native plantings, the social gathering space. And if this was the only building that was being built downtown, I'd say, fantastic, this is great, go for it. We need this. The trouble is, this is the 4th building that's being recommended downtown. And with the addition of the 102 cars, it brings to over 700 cars that are being recommended for downtown. This is not right. we will be gridlocked. That's my biggest fear. There's, it's already, the traffic in Grimsby was already congested before COVID, and it's going to be worse after COVID because people have moved here because they realize they can work at home. So I agree with Sandra that it should be kept to 4 stories, because if we let this go to 7 stories, the other condos are going to want to be 7 stories too. So I have mixed feelings about this, but you really have to keep the number of stories down and absolutely the number of cars down. Nice touch to add bicycles, but we don't have room for bike lanes. We just don't. Grimsby is between the escarpment and the lake. We don't have room to grow. We don't have room for all these cars. We have to keep the numbers down. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Up next, we have Jane Wolfenberg, 6 Baker Road North. Welcome, Jane. Oh, Jane, are you there? Yes. All right. Well, we'll come back to Jane. We'll move to who's up next on the list is Veronica Chawal. Veronica, good evening.
Good evening. I just kind of went through a bunch of these points. I kind of, collected what I could previously, and then just kind of want to go off of what some of the other residents' concerns have been. First of all, I would like to thank this developer for having, a pretty open policy with residents and trying to be as open as possible and providing information previously so you didn't kind of throw this on us. And I do really appreciate the fact that you've teamed up with the GBF and have helped in that way as well, and also protected the heritage homes. So thank you for that. But there are a few concerns that I did want to address. First of all, when we're talking about, one thing actually was that you had mentioned that the people that you spoke with, most of the concerns were design related. And I will say that as an admin for a community Facebook group with 2,600 Grimsby residents, there were a lot of people that were concerned about traffic and parking, and myself definitely. We had 165 people commenting. Design was that was minimal. When we talk about the parking and the traffic issues. So just looking at the official plan, I noticed a few things that popped out. One thing is in our Grimsby's official plan, it projected that the population of Grimsby in 2031, that's 10 years from now, is 32,800 people. According to Niagara Region stats, our 2021 population is already 30,300. So we're pretty close to where we were already envisioning 10 years from now. And this doesn't even include the 6 condos at the Lizani condos, Odyssey, Century condos, and then we also approved the Branthaven developments. So we are well past what the official plan had already intended. And back then, it's pretty clear that there was already this thinking that we need to make sure that traffic and parking is respected. So please keep that in mind moving forward. And another thing with the official plan is that it does talk about intensification, but it also says sprinkled throughout the official plan, that intensification has to happen in areas that have the ability to accommodate and also have the infrastructure to support it. And as we've seen, we do not have the ability to accommodate. There's only so much land. We've already have the Century condos and all of these other developments that we have approved. And this far exceeds what we can actually justify. So with parking specifically, I actually did a little drive-by today, and I went through that whole LCBO parking lot where Wicked Things, all of that area there, just to see how many parking spots we have. I went at 12:30 this afternoon. Just roughly, I noticed that there were 146 parking spots roughly in that area. There were only 18 that were actually available. So 128 parking spots were used at 12:30 on a Monday in the afternoon. So in addition to this condo, we're also going to have to ensure that 128 spots are being accounted for so that they're not spilling over into other businesses, onto Oaks Road and other residential areas. And also respecting the communities that were here long before this property was purchased. And traffic, actually, oh, and another thing with the parking that concerned me was really with when we're talking about 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, 3 bedroom condos, we know that, okay, maybe a 1 bedroom will accommodate, we'll have a couple, maybe they'll share a car. Chances are if you have a 2 bedroom, could be 2 cars, right? We're talking about, it could be a teenage son or teenage daughter, whatever. So 3 bedrooms, probably looking at 3 cars. So really realistically, we're looking at 129 parking or cars, you know, and 129 parking spots that should be accommodated. Those are my issues with parking. Traffic, huge concern. If people can't get into the downtown core, they know that there's no parking. People are just not even gonna try to shop in the downtown. Mainly the issues driving through town that I know I experience all the time. Our left-hand turns are pretty much impossible. It's one of those, you know, yes, we're friendly, but it's always a matter of waving people through, which isn't safe, and we can't be doing that all the time. So clearly, you know, we don't have the ability to have people safely travel through town. And this isn't a project that only is an issue for the people that live, you know, within that tiny area of the downtown. This affects everybody. Everybody drives through town to get, you know, to schools, to hospitals. It affects everybody. So please, I'm asking for this to be capped at 4 stories. We do not have the parking. We do not have the ability for safe travels through. Lastly, I just had a question about, you had spoken about these are going to be rentals. And I would like to know if these are going to be affordable rental accommodations. If you could please just comment on what the cost of a 1 bedroom would be. I would greatly appreciate that. Thank you. That's it for my comments.
All right, thank you, Veronica. Up next, we have Laura Noble Wolgamet, 103 Ridge Road West. Sorry if I didn't pronounce your name right, Laura. This is second call for Laura Noble Wolgamet, 103 Ridge Road West. Okay. All right, up next we have DG Roberts. All right. All right, we'll move to Duncan Story, 29 Mountain Street.
Hi there, my name's Duncan Story. I live on 29 Mountain Street. Yeah, I'm neighbors with Sandra right across the road. And I, a lot of which I can validate a lot of what she said about the traffic. But then the other gentleman made a really good point, is that issue is kind of separate. It's been happening for a long time. Yes, progressively worse, but that's been going on for quite some time now. So what is the Mountain Street traffic situation really like? We have, like Sandra said, dumpers, water trucks, 18-wheelers, 53-footers, all coming down that incline and going the speed like there's nothing, like there's no daylight in tomorrow. So what are we going to do about this? When I opened up my mail and saw the diagram, I thought for sure there would be, 2 exits. I emailed the town and asked for a third out the Balsam Lane to alleviate the traffic coming through Mountain Street. So that Elm and Mountain light, yeah, that's the shortest light. So that's about 15 seconds to get from green to red and vice versa on the going the other way. Then you hit the downtown Main Christie light, and that's about, I think, 1 minute, but it feels like an hour waiting at that light. In between Elm and Main, we've got the Raised Food Basics parking lot and by the funeral home. If that's the only exit coming out of the 7-story condo, that's just going to turn into one big hodgepodge nightmare for traffic. And then you got the southbound traffic trying to turn into the condo. It's just going to be a nightmare because people miss the lights, and then it's just going to clog all the way back up. So, I'm going to remain impartial to the condo development itself, and just note that there has to be more exits for this to work, because Mountain Street, the problem has gone too far for too long already. And that's my time. Thank you.
Thank you, Duncan. Up next, we have Maria Clark, 26 Oak Street.
Hi, thank you so much. Similar to some of the other individuals, of course, there's always the issue of the traffic, the extra cars, and all of that. And taking in extra consideration on top of that are the visitors that these people are going to be having at their residence. So now we're taking away all those extra parking spots. I'm on Oak Street. People already use Oak Street a lot for, the Bruce Trail, which is great. And I'm not against that at all. I think it's awesome. But now having people parking in front here and walking over to the building, I feel like is going to increase as well. I agree in the sense of that only that one exit on Mountain, it would cause a ton of congestion. There's already a ton of congestion. I walk quite a bit around town here, and coming out on that area, people coming from Food Basics and from Balsam, just that alone, the congestion builds. And especially during rush hour times, you add on top of that, like in the morning between 7 and 9, and the afternoons between 4 and 6. I find that traffic is just unreal. So you're adding another over 100 vehicles trying to do the same thing coming in and out. Again, just going to cause a lot of issues. And yes, traffic is not part of, the infrastructure's problem. But until that's something that's resolved, I don't think this should really even be on the table yet. Or for sure, lowering the number of levels on this building. I think 7 is just really real too high just for this area. It's a quaint area. I know I moved to Grimsby because I liked how small and friendly, and it just has that family feel to it. By doing this in the middle of the downtown, I understand, and I am definitely for growth and development and changing and all of that good stuff. But I think it's just a bad location for what is planned. Maybe somewhere else, closer, like kind of outside of that main area. But As said before, that's a main highway up and to going to the highway and then up the mountain. So it's it causes a lot of issues, I think. And personally, I think we're already way too busy. Weekends driving downtown, I don't know, other than the individuals that have already spoken and everyone else who lives in Grimsby, like everyone understands it is really busy. And even crossing the road, I've almost gotten hit 3 times because people aren't paying attention, and everyone's trying to get that right hand turn, not looking because they've just waited, a minute or so at a light. So I think it's something that needs a little bit more discussion, and maybe traffic, the town needs to look at those issues first before moving on with this development project, and then, coming up with some sort of solution. That would be great. So that's everything. Most everything else has pretty much been said. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Maria. Up next, we have Carlo Zanin, 21 Elm Street.
Hi.
Good evening, Carlo.
Good evening. At this point in time, I'm going to remain impartial, and I'm going to withhold any comments for future time. So I'll just let things go at that.
All right. Thank you, Carlo. Ian Robertson, 396 Park Road North.
Thank you, Mayor Jordan. I agree with all the previous commenters, but I would like to note that in particular, the parking has been reduced from 128 to now 102 based on comparisons with cities drawn from the GTA and their parking requirements. I would have to say that since all of those cities are well over 100,000, I don't think that's a fair comparison. And to use their reduced parking limits, especially in view of the fact that they have municipal transportation systems, which makes it less needing of a car, it doesn't make the same comparison to Grimsby at all. The other thing I really do think would make sense for this building if it owned all those properties, including the ones on Elm Street, and then put this project in place. That would be a sensible use of the space, but they have shoehorned a building of 7 stories on a very small footprint, and it fundamentally changes the character of downtown Grimsby and would further encourage other developers to almost insist on being allowed to build to the same height, which I think will be very detrimental in the long term to Grimsby. Thank you.
Mayor Jordan, it's Drew Sinclair from SVN, and this is a question for yourself and for Terry. We weren't certain, and I'm just going back and forth with some of the Castle Point team, whether there was an opportunity to respond to a few of the questions that have been given, or whether we should wait until the end. We weren't on the agenda that was issued. There's no mention of a response section. So Terry or Mayor Jordan, do either of you have, or could you tell us how we're going to proceed?
I just got confirmation from the clerk that we're going to do it with questions at the end, answers at the end. So if you can refer back to these questions and give the answers at the end. All right.
We can do that. Yeah,
thank you
very much, Mayor.
All right. So moving forward, we're moving to Melissa Bone, 66 Sumac Court. Good evening, Melissa. All right, up next, Terry Bone, 66 Sumac Court. Okay, we move to Christy Almond Fraser.
Christy's actually part of our team. I'm not
Okay.
sure how she made it onto the delegate list, Mayor
All
Jordan,
right.
but
Well, thank you
I
for
don't think she
that
has any-
clarification.
Sorry about that. Yeah, of course.
Next up, we have Robin Atwood, 98 Elm Tree Road East. Okay, Ken Cherney, 9 Roslyn Avenue. Ken, I do see you, so I know you're there. Good evening. I think you're muted still right now. Ken, you're still muted.
There we go.
Yeah, there you are.
There
I can
we
hear you now. Go ahead.
Sorry. I'll be very brief. I agree with all of the other comments. Parking obviously is a big concern. I just wonder if anything has been done by the town or by the region to look into the traffic problems. This is something that I think should be looked into. The other is that yes, if the 7-story building is granted, then absolutely other builders for downtown Grimsby will absolutely want 7 stories. So there's no way we can grant this. We have to be firm at 4 stories, I think. And that's it. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Ken. Up next, we have Glenna Kearney, 12 Beverly Street. No. All right, we'll move on to Nick DeFlavio, 335 Main Street West. All right, Nick doesn't seem to be here. Joanne Hall, 110 Gibson Street.
Hi, thank you very much. I am pleased to see that the historic buildings are being maintained. My big concern, as many people have mentioned this evening, is the amount of traffic that will be generated by having a 7-story building. I would really like to see the building capped at the 4 stories to agree with the plan of Grimsby, and to make it a little safer for people coming and going. It is extremely busy in the core. A traffic circle will not solve the problem of trucks coming down mountain. Lots of times it is quite dangerous trying to cross the street there. And so I think the only way to help would be to maintain the building to 4 stories. Thank you for the time.
Thank you, Joanne. Up next, we have Jay Perry, 25 Orchard Parkway. Jay Perry doesn't seem to be here. Devin Braun, 136 Main Street West.
Hi there. Are you able to hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you. Good evening.
Okay. Hi, good evening. I'd just like to say thanks to everybody who's put the presentation together and all the speakers from tonight. Additionally, all the neighbors and community members here. Great questions so far. I'm not going to touch on things that have been concerns. I do share those concerns, especially with traffic. I just live up the street, but I would like someone to just touch on the aspect of affordable housing. It was mentioned that the development is providing a diversity of housing sizes, but maybe not necessarily, it doesn't quite seem like it's necessarily a diversity for socioeconomic stability in the community. Housing is definitely at shortage in a lot of places in North America, especially in our area, Southern Ontario. But that's also affordable housing. So if someone can speak to that, that would be fantastic. That's all for me. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Up next, Terry Kramer, 12 Nassau Drive. Okay. Terry doesn't seem to be here. And Kevin Luchenheisen, 37 Main Street West. Sorry about the name. Good evening, Kevin.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for the presentation. I've learned a lot here tonight alone. So there's a lot that I need to take back and think about. But I'm all for downtown intensification. I own 2 buildings downtown on Main Street here. Family business downtown since 1975. And we've, over the years, council has put forward potential parking studies several times, and they always get canceled out of the budget at the last minute. But I really think a parking study is needed. My biggest concern is definitely parking. That lot off Balsam Lane is full every day. And I think the easy flow of pedestrian traffic from the development is just going to be a natural place for tenants and visitors to park, putting a lot of burden on downtown Main Street, the merchants of downtown who are already struggling for parking. So I think there's likely a solution there. Again, I'm all for the downtown intensification. We need some more people. We need affordable housing. We need the population down here to support the community and downtown. But again, my biggest concern is the parking itself. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. So now that's the delegates, unless anyone else has shown up that wasn't there earlier that was called. And seeing none. All right, we'll go to Drew. You're ready to answer any of the questions that were formulated during the delegations.
So I might, Mayor Jordan, thank you. And thank you everyone for sharing your commentary and your insights as well, and concerns, most importantly. I think the questions that were asked, some pertain to built form, but they largely pertain to the type of development it was with regard to the housing itself. So I am going to maybe ask Elsa Fancello and Jasmine from Castle Point, if perhaps you could comment on the rental housing.
Sure. Thanks, Drew, and thanks everyone for providing this feedback. Is very, very helpful for us. We are not proposing condominium housing. We're proposing rental housing. And the intent of this development is to create diversity of different housing types. So 1, 2, 3 bedroom in different forms, including townhouse units. In regards to affordability, the intent is to provide housing for diverse public. We haven't kind of zoomed in on our rental rates and potential inclusion of affordable housing at this stage. We are taking note and we'll hope to continue to work with town staff and the community as we advance the project. Specifically around the tenure. There was a lot of comments as well around height. and I guess parking and traffic concerns. So maybe we can touch on height first and then move to parking and traffic. Does that make sense? I'm looking at my team.
Sounds right. Go for it, Elsa.
Great.
If you want me to comment on height, I'm more than
Perfect.
happy to speak to the height. It was only referenced a couple times, the specific height, although I just want to make sure, because it's a public forum and everyone has a chance to hear the comments. So I want to make sure they're somewhat accurate, that the height of the building is proposed at 7 stories. The current official plan allows for heights up to 6 with council approval. So it's important to note that's the context we're in, and that it is the intensification zone downtown where new units are intended to be delivered downtown. So what I want to acknowledge in that is a lot of people suggested a support for development at a lower height. So we've heard that, but with regard to the overall height, the overall height is well under 100 feet. It's actually more in the 60 to 70 foot range to the top of the overall structure. So there was a comment of 120 feet. I just want to make sure that that's clear, that we're quite a bit lower than that. And that the official plan does permit up to 6 stories with council approval, with the general acceptance of 4 stories. But the comment with regard to setbacks and the shoehorning in, I absolutely understand where those comments are coming from with regard to the development of this site. But we've gone to really great lengths to assure that the more than the generally acceptable standards for setbacks have been accommodated on all sides, because our primary concern goes not just to what the neighbors might do or the impacts on the neighbors, but also the people that are living here and making sure it's a great space to live. Livability is first and foremost our top of mind for both the existing residents and future residents of the community. So the setbacks from the side yards, all of this is available well within the packages that we've submitted. But we have very generous setbacks on both the east and west sides of the proposed development on all sides, with inclusion of really excellent landscape within those zones. And so a lot of thought has gone into it. I suppose it's just a comment in response to a few of the comments that were made, but I don't want to, in responding to those comments in a way, what's the term for it, disacknowledge or suggest we don't understand where they're coming from, because I think they're just the fact that you brought them up suggests we have to look more closely and make sure we're getting it right. So I've heard that. But Elsa, I'm not sure if you can add anything else with regard to height. The one thing I would add, just to say, it's by no means what would be considered a high-rise development. It is very much a kind of lower mid-rise development in terms of its form. But the way, in the context of downtown Grimsby, it's really important to understand that the height is, with regard to its visibility, and this was the Niagara Escarpment Commission's perspective, that the height buried and set so far back from the street, specifically on Mountain, doesn't itself render any impacts on the views and the view corridors along the street. So the height itself should be assessed more on, and Sandra specifically, I heard your comments on the shadows, and we understand those fully. But in the study and the analysis of shadows, the shadow impacts are almost exclusively on other downtown intensification lines. So the shadow impacts themselves, which are marginal from what would otherwise be permitted under the current policy framework, all occur on lands that are anticipated within the town of Grimsby's official plan to contribute towards meeting the long-term housing policy objectives of the site. There were comments, really astute comments, and some great work done, I think, by others reviewing existing population against regional growth targets. I would leave it to others to comment on how that sits with the town with regard to their own official plan and their ongoing review. But I certainly hope that helps a little bit understand the context within which this was delivered. The only other element I would matter, and we don't get a chance to talk about this because it's not a matter of planning per se, but it does impact things like affordability and retention of heritage, that there's been an immense amount of work done by the development team, ourselves included, on trying to understand how to make possible the improvement in the retention of the heritage elements and to create the great public spaces. And there is what's called a pro forma, or a kind of plan that underlies a development like this. And we've done a lot of work with the developer in understanding what the costs are of all of these elements. And the alternative is of course to remove more and to build lower and to build a more extensive and complete. You could build in the absence of the heritage buildings on the site, you could build more density at a lower height. But the objective here was to keep the heritage and make sure that retaining the heritage and retaining the cultural facade, the front on Mountain and a really great space and a series of public spaces for the community was the priority. So keeping the buildings well away, and if there is any small footprint, it's by our own doing, by retaining the majority of the site for open space. which is a little unusual in the context of this development. And many of you who've reviewed other development applications would have seen in the core would have seen much more aggressive overall build out plans for the site. You'll notice in this case that we're restricting development to about 50% of the overall site set way back from the street by intent to make sure that the impacts are controlled and that we're prioritizing public space and retention of heritage above everything else. With regard to the comments on traffic, the one
Sorry,
thing
Drew, just in addition to the retention of heritage and the creation of public space, we are also made a strong commitment to create below grade parking to open up those spaces to create as much green space as possible on site, and to ensure that the street is activated with cultural programming through the creation of the community hub space, as well as new commercial spaces at grade that respond to the street. And Stephanie, I guess, will speak to this as well, but we're also incorporating a lot of the streetscape improvements that the region has flagged along Mountain Street. So we've protected for right-of-way widening along Mountain Street to respond to the streetscape, the future streetscape vision for that stretch of road.
Yeah. And just to add to Elsa's point is there is a widening that the region has asked us to provide on Mountain Street. So I know that, you know, the buffer distance has been brought up between the sidewalk and sort of the street. That's likely one of the things that sort of this updated design is going to sort of address as well too. And so just to get into it as well too, is just one other thing to add is along Mountain Street is, I believe, you know, the region is looking at Mountain Street in terms of the design, the congestion, the truck traffic. And so they'll be able to sort of speak to it, you know, like we are all taking notes and we'll pass these on. But I can't sort of necessarily sort of speak for the region in terms of the plans for Mountain Street, but what I can say is just through this process that we've started with them as part of this project is my understanding there are plans for Mountain Street, and that's something that they are looking at. And just to sort of, I'm just going to sort of speak to a few of the concerns here. I hear you loud and clear. You know, traffic and parking is a concern. Just to give you a little bit of a sense of who I am, who I work for. My name is Stephanie Hardis. I work for a company called BA Group. We are a transportation engineering and planning firm based out of Toronto, but we do a lot of work within the GTA area. And what I can say is just to give you a little bit of sense of what I do and what the work that we have done so far. And, you know, as Jasmine mentioned too, is we are at close to the beginning of the process. And this is a time where we take all your input and there's a lot more input sort of and a lot more check-in points along the way too. But what we've done so far is we provided a transportation impact study, which has included parking, loading, bike review, as well as a traffic operations review too. So as part of that traffic operations review, what we do is we consult with the town and the region to confirm the scope of work and a number of different parameters. We go out and we count the existing condition. So the counts I used were actually pre-COVID counts. So they were done in April 2019. So I have a sense of what the traffic activity is pre-COVID. And that provides a base for our analysis. And then what we do is we layer in future conditions because we want to try and model what's happening today, what's happening around us. So anything like we add something called growth. So there's a certain factor that we apply that takes into account the changes over the years to that base count. But we also look at sort of anything that's happening in the area. So any developments that are planned, under construction, or down the pipeline, that also gets layered into our model. In addition, we sort of provide a forecast of what our traffic would be. We take all this information and we plug it into a software that allows us to almost come up with like a grading system of intersections. And the town and the region has specific standards of what they consider to be operating at acceptable levels and what needs to operate at as busy levels. And so what I can say is this analysis that we've done is it says that it operates under sort of what the town and region says it operates as acceptable levels. With that being said, one of the other things that we look at as part of all our work is we look at anything that we can do to make it better. And that's all part of our project and part of our review too. So all this gets packaged up into a report and we issue this to the city. And there's someone just like me, but on the, sorry, not the city, but on the town and the region side. And they are looking at it from your perspective. And so it's not just a consultant for the developer looking at it, but it's also someone just like me on the town and the region side that's looking at it, and they give us comments back. So currently we're in that process where we've provided one submission, they gave us some comments back, and we are going to be providing a resubmission application. So again, we're going to take these comments into sort of effect, and we'll sort of look at how we incorporate them into our resubmission report. In terms of parking, what I will say is we're looking at reducing the residential visitor rate as well as the residential rate to 1 per unit. And as everyone mentioned before, we did sort of provide sort of other rates, which are in downtown areas across the GTA. What I will say is that these are actually, I would say, maximums. In a lot of these areas, these parking ratios are a lot lower than what these are known as, like these are sort of the bylaw standards that we've referenced here. Within these areas in the GTA, they're substantially lower in terms of like what's actually getting approved today. And what I will say is there's a big variation in parking throughout the GTA area. And it has to do with what is the type of model that is being provided. So you have some places that have a higher parking ratio and others that have a lower parking ratio. And it also depends on sort of what the market of the unit is. What I can say is there's different ways of working at, like from a residential perspective, if there's permit parking, there's ways of restricting permit parking for the area, for this building. If that's a condition, if that's something that you would like to look at, that's something that we can look at doing here. But with that being said, is if we look at sort of what the trends are from the improvements that are being done to the Grimsby GO station, if we're looking at the trends across the GTA from the parking perspective, if we're looking at the trends for the different types of like units and the model between sort of condo and rental, we're seeing sort of a downward trend across the GTA area. And so that's sort of where we come from a reduced parking perspective. In addition to that, like a reduced parking perspective also means less cars on the road, which means less congestion. So this could also help with the whole congestion story as well too, with having less cars. So those are sort of I don't want to take up too much time because I realize we're 3 minutes past 8. But those are some of my thoughts in terms of some of the comments that we have here.
Thanks, Stephanie. I just wanted to quickly touch on the comments that this project is going to set I guess a negative precedent for future development applications in the town of Grimsby. So again, this site is located in an area earmarked for intensification and new growth. It's different than the Main Street intensification area that has a different kind of set of parameters. But this area is adjacent to the downtown or to the Main Street, and it is earmarked for growth and new investment. We are proposing the retention of 2 heritage buildings, as well as the inclusion of diversity of different housing types, also below grade parking, also a significant amount of open space, and community spaces, all to which are different than other development applications currently being reviewed by the town and the region. So again, it's not, you can't, in our opinion, it's, each site is unique, each site is different, and based on what we're hoping to achieve on the site, it needs to be reviewed in context of the policy objectives, as well as kind of the community benefits that we're hoping to achieve. And we feel that it's not setting a negative precedent.
Hi, do you mind, Elsa? I'm going to chime in here now for a minute, since I gather we're at the end of the session, and I apologize for going past the 8 o'clock time. I'm not visible on the screen. My name is Alfredo Romano. I'm actually the president of Casa Point Numa and have been doing this for some 30 years. And I want to thank everyone for participating in this session. I've learned quite a bit tonight about some of the perspectives of the residents that I hadn't heard previously. And I really appreciate that. The questions and the comments were intelligent, and we're quite sensitive to, let's face it, it's your town, it's your community. We want to be part of it. And we're very sincere in our efforts. As you know, we've gone out early and often to gather as much feedback as possible. And we really do appreciate this opportunity, and we do not take it for granted at all. We consider it a privilege to be here working with you. I heard something tonight, though, which was quite fascinating, and that's about parking. I heard it repeatedly, and thank you, Stephanie, for your very comprehensive answer, and Elsa for your contribution, and Drew. It's not our intent to add any burden to the existing downtown core of the town. So we will examine this very carefully. I'm making that promise to you. It was our intent from the very outset to do three things. One, set a build zone for the property that was set back from the street so that the great views to the escarpment are protected, and that the building massing would not, as Drew pointed out, would be a more pleasant experience rather than an ominous experience at curbside. And we would protect the heritage buildings and let them stand out and actually be prominent and create public space. So, you know, what Drew was referring to was a different approach, which some developments take, which is a squash and spread. So you take your entire land area, you build it up to 4 stories, and you actually achieve the same or greater density. We tried to set it back from the street to respect views, to respect the heritage buildings, putting all the parking underground so that we could achieve maximum public space and public enjoyment of the site. And on the parking numbers, as Stephanie said, we will continue to pursue our analysis. And I can promise you this, we will look very, very carefully at the parking numbers and it's true. There's not the same level of transit currently existing in Grimsby as in other parts of the GTA. And I take that point and I take it very seriously. Presumably that will improve over time with the GO station and with other opportunities within the town to connect to that station. And hopefully public transit is an important part of what we do. We encourage it in every community that we go to, and we contribute where we can to the development of public transit. It's a very, very important part of the puzzle. There was a very good question about affordable housing and tenure and public transit, and feasibility of delivering affordable housing really depends on numerous factors. It's not just one or two things. You really do need the right size of development. You need the right amenities, and you need the right circumstances in which to introduce affordable housing. We start with creating rental, and that is already a stroke and a very big move in the right direction, because it's very, very difficult for young people and for even elderly people in the profile of a town to afford to purchase a condo. As we see the prices rise, rental becomes a real possibility where people are becoming empty nesters and or new and young families who need to establish themselves in the town and can't afford to come up with a significant down payment to purchase a condo or a house. So I really want to thank you again for allowing us to enter into your community. Harley, who is heading up the development, as you know, is from Grimsby, and we've relied on him heavily to tell us more about the town and more all the time. And I've really enjoyed, by the way, coming through the town now many times in the last couple of years. Matter of fact, had a great visit to the waterfront just a number of weeks ago and enjoyed it thoroughly. I'd seen something I'd never seen before, which was the many of the heritage cottages that you have dotted across your waterfront. It's really a spectacular town. And as I said, we consider it a privilege to be there. I'm sorry I'm not visible on the screen. I'm actually standing in a line waiting to vote. So I'm voting tonight because I'm not going to be available to vote next Monday. So I apologize for not being visible to you, and thank you. I'll hand it over to you, Lord Mayor, if you're still there, hopefully. Thank you so much for allowing us the opportunity to make our presentation and propose our development in your city.
Great. Thank you very much for your comments, and thank you everyone for their comments tonight. The rest of the information report, correspondence is all available on the agenda on the town's website. And all the studies are available on Let's Talk Grimsby. And so as this process moves forward, up next, we will have the statutory public meeting. It hasn't been scheduled at this time, but that's where the second kick at the can, so to speak, will take place. So we have run a bit over time. So I'd just like to wish everyone a good evening and thank you everyone for coming out. Thank you and good night. The meeting is adjourned.
No more lockdowns.